Welcome, welcome, folks. We finally made it to Friday. It is August the 15th, 2025, and you are watching Hurricane Hub Live, where we take a deep dive into tropical weather and have an in-depth discussion about storms that are out there in the basin right now. And of course, we've got a lot to talk about. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandajis. Let's get into HHL tonight. We've got Erin that has intensified. It's become a hurricane, the first of the Atlantic 2025 season. It's a minimal grade, Category 1 right now, but forecast to become a Category 4 powerhouse. Within the next couple of days, really by the end of the weekend, we're looking at Category 3, and then early next week is a Category 4. Now, rapid intensification is possible. You're going to hear that term getting thrown about, but in order to actually satisfy that definition, it has to meet certain criteria. We're going to go through what that criteria is, and if I think it's actually going to rapidly intensify in the long term here. Now, in terms of impacts to the United States, indirectly, impacts will be felt. So we're not looking at a landfall on the U.S. In fact, I don't think Erin will make a landfall at all. It'll stay offshore of the U.S. East Coast. It'll stay to the likely to the west of Bermuda. And right now it's to the north and east of the Lesser Antilles. And then the big question after that is going to be what comes next. It's the 15th of August. We've got a lot of hurricane season to go. And within the next month, we hit the peak of the season. So activity will become much more common out in the Atlantic basin. Let's start with Erin. Satellite imagery here with a brand new advisory, the intermediate advisory coming our way at 8 o'clock, dropping from the National Hurricane Center. We'll get a full advisory next in 3 hours at 11 o'clock tonight. That'll have any changes in the forecast cone or forecast track. 85-mile-per-hour wind, so it has strengthened. Still a mid-grade Category 1 storm right now. This came down with 90-mile-per-hour winds, still moving to the west-northwest. So it started that much anticipated gradual turn to the north and west that started late last night and will continue and actually amplify and eventually take on more of a northwest turn, north, and then northeast. I'll show you the latest track here in just a minute, but moving at 17 miles per hour. And based on some recon aircraft that's currently within Erin, they did sample surface pressure down into the low 980s, and you can see that reflected on the 8 o'clock advisory here from the Hurricane Center. Close-up look now here on infrared satellite imagery. Again, we like to use this filter on satellite to get a feel for the temperatures of the cloud tops. And when we get really cold cloud tops, that's indicative of strong thunderstorm activity. They stretch higher up into the sky. And we see the really cold cloud tops indicated by the white shadings here. And you can see it completely wrapping around the center. In the last couple images there, you can almost starting to see a warming and clearing of an eye. Maybe the first occurrences of an eye here as this continues to strengthen. Again, on the Saffir-Simpson scale, we are within that Category 1 threshold, right smack dab in the middle, with 85-mile-per-hour winds at this current time. Closer look, too, you can see in the last couple images, looks like there's an eye trying to take shape. Now, at this point in time, where it's currently located, here's the Lesser Antilles. We've got the Leeward Islands here, northern Leeward Islands. This is about the closest that Erin will get to those islands. So the closest, at least in the short term, it'll be to land as it builds to the west and eventually northwest here in the next 24 hours. Switching things up over to visible satellite imagery here, and you can see this definitely is taking on more of an appearance of an intensifying hurricane. Look at this moisture feeder band stretching all the way back down to the south and east there. And then, of course, we've got tremendous outflow aloft that you can see emanating off to the south and west. Still probably a little bit of some shear because I don't see really that much outflow on the north or northeast side of the storm, but overall it's been compensating quite well for if there was any wind shear and any dry air in its immediate area. It's been kind of fencing itself off to being, detrimental to it at all, really. All right, here's a look at water vapor imagery now. And completely surrounding the storm is some dry air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. It's indicative of the rust color, the yellow shades there. Now, as this intensifies, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that it ingests some of this dry air. And sometimes that can help to plateau or maybe even weaken the storm a little bit in the short term as it kind of sputters along with it's almost like an engine running out of gas briefly or running low on gas. It sucks it into its overall circulation and it kind of throws it off kilter a little bit. But at least for now, it doesn't look like it's happening at this immediate time. Now, the closest radar site we've got here, San Juan, Puerto Rico, starting to see some of the outer rain bands, squally activity in the British Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands over to St. St. Martin there as well. But again, not major impacts happening for those areas. And we're also starting to sample some of the winds here within it, which I'll show you here in just a second. But recent recon scan here shows a pressure of 981 millibars. This is a NOAA aircraft here that was doing a high-altitude mission through the system, and that's what prompted the upgrade here. Not really an upgrade, just an increase in intensity of 85-mile-per-hour winds and a drop in pressure. Now, typically, what happens is we see the pressure drop, and then correlating with that is an increase in wind speeds. As the storm gets deeper and stronger, it can produce stronger wind gusts and wind speeds. Now, it is getting over environmental conditions that are certainly conducive to not only intensifying, but intensifying rapidly. Sea surface temperatures have been around 80 degrees or even low 80s for about the last day and a half. But for the first several days of Erin's lifespan, it was over waters that just weren't very warm at all. They were in the upper 70s, not very conducive to support tropical development or tropical growth. Yet it overcame all of that and still maintained tropical storm status up until earlier today. And now it's moving into even warmer waters. Look at the forecast track, heading into an area of the southwest Atlantic that's currently experiencing a marine heat wave. Water temperatures here are in the mid to upper 80s, and it's not just at the skin of the surface of the water. It extends down to a depth. Ocean heat content here is plentiful, and that's deep, warm water. And why that is important is because when we get a strong hurricane, the winds are obviously very strong next to that core, and it starts to mix up the ocean, something called upwelling. And that tends to mix up colder waters from a depth up to the surface, replacing the warm water at the surface. Now, when you've got deep, warm water, you're just mixing up more and more warm water, so it's plentiful. And it's not really going to run out of energy sources here. So it's moving into a very conducive area for continued intensification. But look at the Caribbean here. I mean, out as you get towards Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, you've just got jet fuel for storms. Thankfully, we have nothing forecast to be in the Caribbean anytime soon, but it's always fair game as you get into late August and early September closer to the peak. All right, let's visit the hurricane track here of Erin. We're going to visit this multiple times, but this is the tail end of that track as we get into early next week, and we're already up to a Category 4. The intensity guidance has continued to go up each time they put out an update during the full advisory. 145-mile-per-hour winds at peak Monday afternoon, Category 4. Category 5 is 157 and greater. So could it possibly be stronger than what's indicated? It could. It could over-amplify for sure and overperform as it moves to the north. But I just want to show you something clear here, is this cone does not look, or the storm does not look to impact any land. Notice the track stays well offshore of the eastern seaboard. We've got Bermuda right there, so it may get into the cone, but it looks like it'll pass by off to the west of the island, which is going to be a whole nother issue if it gets close enough. It'll be on the dirty side of that storm, strongest winds, heaviest of the rain, that sort of thing. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And then by Wednesday afternoon, this is when it goes out to, we get a 5-day cone, so still a Category 4 at that point. So what do the hurricane models see here? Each line is a different computer model. We call these a spaghetti plot. And mostly in line with what the Hurricane Center is showing here. Most of these lines falling within that cone, that forecast cone. There are a few outliers farther off to the east, and earlier there were a few outliers to the west. Now it seems to be shifting farther to the east, farther away from the east coast of the U.S., and unfortunately closer to Bermuda. How about the ensemble members of both the GFS and the European? What you're looking at here, I know there's a lot of lines, but in the red is going to be the European ensemble. The yellow is the GFS. What is an ensemble? It's a run of either the Euro or the GFS, dozens of times in some cases, tweaked very minuscule tweaks at the beginning. They change a variable slightly to kind of get a different outcome. And you can see the spread here, again, majority of which falling within that cone. And I tell you what, the uncertainty or the spread in the long term has really shrunk. A couple days ago, at the end of the forecast cone, we had about a 1,200-mile spread. When it was down here, we had a spread from the Bahamas to like 200 miles east of Bermuda. Now it is really narrowed, the majority of which, again, are falling within that cone. A few outliers to the east and outside, and there are a few ensemble members in both the Euro and the GFS, the yellow and red here, that fall outside of the cone to the west there. Could those possibly verify? Sure, they could, but they would be well outside of all the rest of the agreement here that falls within that cone from the National Hurricane Center. A few. We've got a GFS and a European run here that comes awfully close to Cape Hatteras, and the southern Outer Banks of North Carolina. So something that bears watching. So again, this is the first hurricane of the season. And when we look back at climatology, typically we see our first hurricane occur on or around the date of August the 11th. So we're a little bit late in regards to climatology. And typically in an average season, we get around 7 hurricanes or so. And then 3 of which are going to be major hurricanes. So when do we typically see those? It is forecast to become a major hurricane, and typically that doesn't happen until September the 1st. If we get a major hurricane here, say Sunday, the 17th, we're going to be 2 weeks ahead of time for the first major hurricane of a season. And again, 3 major hurricanes are an average season during a normal hurricane season. All right, let's get some buoy reports now. We see on satellite where exactly Erin is, and there are a few buoys nearby. You know, they really have the buoys as you get closer into the Bahamas here, but we have one to sample that does get some wave heights here, and we can also get some ocean wind speeds. We're getting some 12-foot wave heights here on this buoy located to the north and almost northwest of the center of Erin right now, with some winds there at 36 miles per hour. So again, it's pretty displaced from the center. Way far out, we're already getting close to tropical storm force winds there, well northwest and 12-foot seas. And wait until you see how big of a wave generator this thing is going to be as it's between Bermuda and the east coast of the United States. Sustained winds in areas that we do have observations in the northern Leeward Islands. Here we're getting some spots sustained, not very important here. Or really, the word I'm looking for, I just can't think of right now. It's not very appealing at this moment in time, right? There's not many wind gusts here that are very strong at all, despite some of these islands being under a tropical storm watch. These are the only watches currently out, which tells you right there that there's not that much land that's going to be impacted by this storm, which is great news. So tropical storm watches, and despite the storm not being far away and already throwing some outer bands here, having this not been upgraded to a tropical storm warning, meaning most likely probably won't see tropical storm force winds. Make it in areas like Anguilla. Bermuda was actually dropped from the tropical storm watch, and St. Kitts and Nevis also seeing some watches up there. Those will probably be canceled here in the next 12 to 24 hours. So let's compare the models now. We saw the Ensemble members of the GFS and the European. Let's look at the actual operational. As we go out in time, jumping ahead to the weekend and into early next week, this is about the period of time we're starting to see a jump to a major hurricane, Category 3, 4 at this point in time. Pretty good agreement among the 2 global models, the Euro and the GFS, both almost on top of each other. We do have the Euro kind of showing a solution slightly farther to the south and west, GFS a little farther to the north and east there, but generally in line. Timing also in line with both of these as well, moving at the same general speed. And then as we get to Thursday, so a long ways out, almost a week out from now, we're looking at it threading the needle between Bermuda and the east coast of the U.S. There's Bermuda right there. A closer pass by the GFS would indicate more of an impact to Bermuda. If it gets even closer, if the GFS verifies a little farther to the east, stronger winds, the core of the winds, we get closer to Bermuda. The Euro, on the other hand, tracks it slightly farther to the west, which does put maybe some gusty tropical storm force winds in portions of the Outer Banks of North Carolina, if that were to verify. Again, the core of the strongest of the winds are going to be the closer you get to the center of Erin, and I think the center stays far enough from any land that hurricane force winds won't be an issue. We just may have some gale force winds right along the immediate coastline if it verifies farther to the west. And then just also look at how much larger it becomes as it gains latitude. As it climbs north, its wind field will expand, and eventually as it gets farther to the north, it'll begin an extratropical transition as it loses some of its tropical characteristics, and that won't happen for about 10 days. So a lot of time to watch it. Now, since Bermuda looks to be the only area that's going to be really impacted by this storm, let's look back at Bermuda's hurricane history. Now, I only plotted here major hurricanes because that's probably what Erin will be as it passes its closest to the island there. So there's been 36 major hurricanes on record passing within 100 miles of St. George. And it's very, very rare to get a landfall on Bermuda. Although 2014, there were 2 hurricanes that made landfall in a week on the island. It's rare, but that year, 2014, it was quite common. One was a major hurricane, one was not. But very interesting to see there how they all track. And most of the time, it's going to be on a track that's looping on out to sea, obviously. It's very rare we get something coming in out of the Gulf or even developing here in the Southwest Atlantic and moving up in that direction. So it's in a great spot that it can catch those recurvature storms out to sea. All right, so what's steering and what's going to be driving Erin to the north here? in just a little while, really. It's already started that turn to the west-northwest, but eventually it's going to take a sharp turn to the north. And we've got a ridge, a sprawling subtropical high, sprawling ridge here that by Tuesday, by early next week, when we're looking at a Cat 3 or Cat 4, Erin is going to begin to weaken. And we're going to see an opening develop here pretty much from the East Coast to Bermuda. And that's going to allow an escape route for this to begin lifting north and getting sensed and tugged by a trough, an upper-level trough that's going to be dipping on through, or really a cold front that's coming in into southern New England that'll pick that up and lift it to the north and eventually turn it north and east. So this is Erin steering as depicted by the Euro. But look at the agreement here. The GFS is very similar. In fact, the breakdown of the ridging happens a little bit earlier, allowing that turn to the north, which is why the GFS is slightly farther to the east. It senses the breakdown a little bit sooner and can maybe make that turn north a little bit earlier and ahead of schedule than what the European is seeing. What will be the results? I mean, it would be a closer pass to Bermuda if that was the case with the GFS, but also the subtropical high may not break down as quickly as the GFS thinks, and it could, come out to be exactly like the European is seeing here. But ridging over the southeast U.S. should keep it way offshore and not going to be an impact to the southeast United States. How about the track history? We've been seeing slow adjustments here to the south and southwest as the storm has been verifying south and southwest of the actual track. Most recently, though, the first time it's actually been adjusted farther to the east and northeast. You can see that red line here on top of all the black lines that are previous forecast paths here, and what the actual path that it's taken so far as a tropical storm and then now a Category 1 hurricane. So it does look to stay safely, at least forecasted to stay safely in between Bermuda and the east coast of the U.S. How does the cone look in the past? This is very interesting to see here. Again, that south to southwest jog over the last couple of days. And then here most recently in the red hue there is the most recent forecast cone that, again, adjusted a little bit farther to the east and northeast to reflect the newest model data. Now, of course, the wind field here is going to be the big thing that you really talk about a lot of times with tropical systems. It's once it gets over land that you introduce the flooding risk with tropical downpours and things like that. But since it won't be interacting with land, this is going to be a big wind generator and a big wave generator out in the open Atlantic. So let's jump ahead and look at the European wind field depiction on Erin by early next week. So this is when it's supposedly going to be a Cat 3 or Cat 4, showing only Cat 1, maybe Cat 2 winds, again, on the northeast side of that storm center. That's where you're always going to find the strongest of the winds. Due right, front right of the storm direction center. So there it is here. And then notice as it gains latitude, how large the wind field expands. So we could potentially, with the forecast track that the Euro is showing, get tropical storm force winds maybe up into portions of the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and then maybe stretching all the way to the east to Bermuda. But this is an ideal track right here because the strongest of the winds, the core of hurricane force winds, maybe even major hurricane force winds, stays way out in the open Atlantic, and then it builds off to the north and eventually moves away and dissipates it in a lot of time. So how about impacts? Indirect impacts here are going to be for some large swells. We're going to look at the wave generation map here in just a minute. It's quite impressive, closer to the core, what some of the wave heights may be. Strong rip currents pretty much from Long Island, Cape Cod, all the way south to Jacksonville, starting probably this weekend and lasting through the end of next week. Rip current risk is there. And then where vulnerable coastal locations, we could see some erosion, and I'm really focused on the Outer Banks there. We've got a lot of houses that we've lost from storm systems being off coast and creating beach erosion. We could definitely see that again with a very strong Erin passing by just offshore. All right, let's look at the wave heights. Check this out. As we get to Wednesday, as it's right between Bermuda and the east coast of the U.S., wave heights here could potentially get up and over 40 to maybe as high as 50 feet. Now, they propagate outwards, and they will not be 50-foot waves by the time they get to the east coast of the U.S. I don't want you to think, oh, my God, we're going to have a tsunami wave coming our way, and it's going to wipe out all coastal locations. Not the case. Surely waves will propagate out in all directions, and we will have some rough surf, maybe 5, 10, 15-foot waves at most, especially if it passes a little bit closer to the eastern seaboard, takes a more westerly track. But right near the core there, we could certainly have some maybe 40, 45, 50-foot waves before it jets on out to the east and northeast, and even stay south of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, as we get through the end of next week. So something very interesting to watch. Now let's talk about the intensity of Erin and if, in fact, rapid intensification could be a possibility. So right now we're sitting at that 85-mile-per-hour winds. The recent update just popped in, so it's up to 85 now. And it is projected to become a 105-mile-per-hour wind, Category 2, by tomorrow night, and then jumping to a Category 4, 130 to 145-mile-per-hour max sustained winds at its peak by Monday afternoon. So the definition for rapid intensification is going to be a jump in peak sustained winds of 30 knots or 35 miles per hour within a span of time of a day, 24 hours. So right now, we're not really seeing any instances here that jumps 35 miles per hour within a 24-hour period, at least yet. That introduces the possibility here that we are going to see an overperformance of Erin. We don't really need to go all that much stronger to see that jump and satisfy the rapid intensification criteria. So it's definitely a possibility that we're going to monitor as we go through the weekend. Not that it'll impact the forecast or anything or impact folks that will be hit by this. It's just going to be interesting to see over such a conducive environment for intensification. And if you're interested, I like stats. So the quickest Cat 1 to Cat 5 jump, not expecting a Cat 5 here, although it's possible. It's always possible. But check out these storms here. One last year, Milton. It made that jump, Cat 1 to Cat 5, at 18 hours. 18 hours. In 2017, that season was huge. Season of Harvey, season of Maria, season of Irma. We had 18 hours also there. And then Andrew was 1992, 24 hours. It took Cat 1 to a Cat 5. So we're Cat 1 now. I don't think we're going to make it to a Cat 5 within the next 24 hours. So that's the good news there. So bottom line here, folks, high confidence that Erin's track stays well east of the U.S. Great news. Indirect impacts are expected, though. As we talked about, heavy surf, dangerous rip currents, higher than normal tides, and some beach erosion is certainly a possibility, if not expected, as we get to the middle to end of next week. And for your planning purposes, the National Hurricane Center will be putting out advisories. This is Eastern Standard Time, 2, 5, 8, 11. So we get the intermediate advisories in between the full. The full advisories come with the track changes. So the next update we get here is going to be a full advisory at 11 o'clock tonight, an update on watches and warnings, storm details, location, and you get a brand new cone, which over its lifetime so far, we haven't seen many changes in the track. So what's next? Erin's out of here in the next week. Still a long time to watch it. What's going to be on the heels of it? Well, still the main development region will be the hot spot, and that's typical for this point in the hurricane season. By the end of the month, 20th to 26th, the Climate Prediction Center does highlight an area coming off Cabo Verde Islands, exactly where we saw Erin originate from a robust wave train of tropical waves, African easterly waves here. Moderate chances, so that's north of a 40% chance of development coming out of that area, surrounded by an area of 20% low chances. Jumping out to the first couple of days of September to Labor Day weekend. Still highlighting this area, main development region, although shifting it a little farther to the west, including portions of the Caribbean for, again, a low threat of a 20% chance of maybe seeing some more tropical systems originating from this area. So that's the latest on today's video, folks. I really appreciate you for watching. In the meantime, if you've got questions on tropical weather or you have some input on our next show, because we do this every weeknight at 8 p.m., find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, and on TikTok. And as I mentioned, we are right back here. We're going to do it this weekend as well, 8 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, and we'll continue Hurricane Hub Live, 8 p.m. all week next week.